That was engineered to produce a political outcome to keep the terrorists in control of these markets. It's the first example of unambiguous, uncontested domestic financial terrorist attack. Basically, Lloyd Blankfein is the Timothy McVeigh of Wall Street, essentially.
By the way, that guy that you heard earlier in the show, Ben Lichtenstein, shouting from the floor of the Chicago Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
Well, he's in the S&P futures pit.
That's right. Well, the Chicago and New York are interlinked. We saw that in the 1987 crash, which I was, there working on Wall Street at the time, so I got a front row seat in terms of how the two cities are interlinked between the cash market in New York and the futures market in Chicago. And you see the interchange and the interplay between these two and the computer systems that are hooked up.
The 87 crash was a bigger percentage crash than this last one. This was the biggest, real number.
Point.
Point crash. The single biggest point drop within a single day in the Dow Jones Industrials storied history, they call it. According to the government officials, investigators have traced the calamity back to the trades in Chicago, which were picked up by automated trading computers in New York. The New York computers, in turn, issued a series of sell orders, which had a cascading effect on the Dow as even more programs picked up on the trading and issued their own sell orders. That's exactly what happened in the 87 crash.
Yeah, that's right.
However, that was at the very early stages of a bull market. This is at the very early stages of a bear market. So,
the 87 crash was... you could say was not intentional, because the President's Working Group on Finance was really created after the crash. So this was Rob Rubin, Ronald Reagan, and Alan Greenspan created the Working Group on Finance. And on the Monday following the crash of 87, this would be September 21st or 22nd, the Monday or the Tuesday after the crash, they started buying S&P futures. The very contract mentioned, as you just said, that this is what they were buying to create a artificial demand for stocks in New York, because the cash market in New York is very sensitive to the futures prices in Chicago, and the arbitrage between these two markets is something that is exploited on a daily basis by folks on Wall Street who have access to unlimited money and pay virtually no commissions, and their cost of funds is zero. So anytime that there's a discrepancy or an arbitrage between Chicago and New York, they can put on a program trade, as it's called, and scalp, a quarter of a point. But if you're talking about a basket that's worth $50 million or $100 million, that quarter of a point is worth a lot of money. So, but not to be content with picking up the nickels and dimes of arbitrage money, they then, after instituting the Working Group of Finance, which euphemistically referred to now as the Plunge Protection Team, got into the business of staging market moves and inculcating their own minds with this doing God's work meme, where in order to fight the quote-unquote terrorists, they would need to jack prices higher, because otherwise they don't want the terrorists to think like they won. You got to make the prices go higher, and then when prices get too high, or when they're trying to pass legislation in Washington to curb market manipulation, then they drop prices down, as we saw on May 6th. So they've taken this little thing that was completely against everything that America is supposed to stand for in terms of free market capitalism. You don't want the government buying and selling S&P futures contracts, because then you've got a centrally planned government, and you have essentially the thing that America was supposed to be fighting for during the Cold War against. So that's what happened in September of 1987 is the beginning of a command and control economy that's in the control of the few bankers who think they're doing quote unquote God's work, or they think that they know better, and they've systematically deregulated every obstacle between them and running the market like, as I had on our Kaiser Report show a couple of weeks ago, a remote control toy car. They want it to go up, they hit the up on it. They want it to go down, they hit the down button. And then why do they do it? Because they say, well, Congress is about to pass legislation that's bad for America. Let's make the market go down. Oh, the terrorists are attacking. Let's show them who's boss. Let's make it go up.
The White House says they do not rule out sabotage in the market fluctuation. They're calling it a fluctuation. that's kind of a sign to me that America's they're coming to terms with their end of empire. You know, the Brits developed their whole understatement and sort of their.
Well, it's an interesting exchange between the press and the White House press spokesperson, and this use of the word sabotage, because I guess the underlying text there is what was being asked was this a terrorist attack, right? So I imagine the person asking the question imagined that forces outside of America were somehow figured out a way to get inside the exchange and cause chaos, right?
Well, apparently, yeah, and some people were asking whether it was China that would have done this. And actually, that's a good question to ask, is there any way that China, who has all these massive holdings of dollars, is there any way that they could have benefited could they have offloaded stuff in this panic? Who knows? Like, how could they have benefited if at all?
It's just like saying, if you witness a car crash outside your window between a Buick and a Chevy, and then you turn to the person next to you and say, I wonder if the car crash was the result of that bluebird over there flying from the branch of the sycamore tree to the elm. It's plausible. It's plausible. The bluebird could have caused it. Right? I mean, there was obvious. The sabotage was the sabotage. Yes, it is sabotage, but it's domestic terrorism. It's domestic sabotage. It's coming from Wall Street, and it's used for political purposes. This is domestic financial terrorism. And yes, it's sabotage. It's from America against America.
Well, there's one little quote in this article, however, about the White House investigating whether or not it hasn't ruled out sabotage. Is that they say Summers, Larry Summers. When the market began to drop, Lawrence Summers was pulled out of meeting and spent a few minutes making phone calls before talking to the president, Gibbs said.
Right.
Well, I'd like to know, as he is paid by us and he works for us, who he called.
Well, Summers is the mole. And he's in the White House, and he reports to Goldman Sachs.
Summers and Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner met with the president later Thursday afternoon to discuss the incident. Like, what do these two guys know? Well, they know a lot about fraud. That's all they know about. They don't know about, how markets really work.
You just have to get through the denial and understand we're talking about a terrorist cell of Larry Summers, Tim Geithner, and Hank Paulson, and Geithner, and Ben Bernanke. It's a terrorist cell. I mean, once you understand that, then the questions become, it's you fall, your rose-colored glasses fall away, and it's quite obvious what's going on here.
Well, and I also like the use of the word incompetent. It's kind of like the fat finger. It was like, oops, it was all a mistake. Everything is always a mistake when it comes to the mafia.